How about this? The U.S. Park Police are...
Start by storming Blackgate!
My number 3 is The French Dispatch, my mistake, The French Dispatch. It's a Wes Anderson movie. I didn't know this movie was coming out this year. For some reason, don't ask me why, but for some reason I thought it was 2021. But I was looking up, I think it was Owen Wilson, his filmography, and I noticed he was doing The French Dispatch, and I looked at the year 2020, I was like, oh my goodness, I have to redo the list. What's going on, everyone? So welcome to my latest video. This is, of course, my review for The French Dispatch, which is a 2021 Wes Anderson film. It is a comedy, drama, anthology film. It's a film that, as you could tell with the prelude, I was really looking forward to this film. It was originally supposed to come out in 2020, obviously, and I was very, very sad when the pandemic hit because I knew it was going to get pushed back. And I remember that there was like a little bit of, a hiatus where it was like, what's going to happen? When is this going to be released? And they finally decided October 2021. And the question is, was it worth the wait? Well, I'll get to that in a moment. But first thing, I wanted to give you guys a little bit of background knowledge in terms of my relationship with Wes Anderson's films. I'm a huge fan of his. I think that his work is incredible. I mean, like, look at this, guys. I'm a huge Wes Anderson fan. I'm just going to be honest. Look at this. I own all of his movies. I own 2 copies of The Fantastic Mr. Fox. I own 2 copies of The Grand Budapest Hotel. Right here. I own The Life of College with Steve Zissou. Royal Tenenbaums. Rushmore. 2 copies of Moonrise Kingdom. Bottle Rocket. Iowa Dogs, and the Darjeeling Limited. So, yeah, as you guys can tell, like I said, I'm a big fan of Wes Anderson's. He's an auteur. He's a filmmaker that when you hear about him making a movie, it just warms your heart because he is someone that is very meticulous with his directing. You know what to expect in his films in that he's going to have perfect symmetrical cinematography. He's going to have quirky, interesting characters, that sly, dry humor, but at the same time also snappy dialogue to match it. It's not a film that's necessarily going to be for everyone. And this is, again, something that you expect with a Wes Anderson film. You know it's a Wes Anderson film when you watch it from frame one. And The French Dispatch, knowing all that, again, being the big fan that I am, I didn't really need to know going into this movie what it was about. But if you guys do need to know a little bit, what I will say, it's about a newspaper, and it's an anthology-esque film told in 3 different vignettes of stories, pretty much. I'm not a big fan of anthology movies, truth be told, which when I found out that it was an anthology movie, because I didn't know it was until literally a day or 2 ago. When I found out, I was like, oh no, because I'm not a big fan of them. I think that they usually don't work for me. Usually there's like 1 or 2 storylines that I find interesting in terms of like the short stories. And then there's like 1 or 2 other ones that I just don't find interesting. Like I think about The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. There was like the first story that I was interested in that. And then the other ones just kind of like fizzled out. And by the end I was like, well, that wasn't my favorite Coen Brothers movie, but I still appreciated it, but I haven't revisited it. So that was what I was kind of nervous about with The French Dispatch. And I will say it's not quite like that with The Ballad of Buster Scruggs in this case, because I do know The French Dispatch is a movie that I need to revisit. I know it. There are certain aspects of this movie where I say to myself, this is not for first viewing. This is for multiple viewings to critique it and to break it down and to really kind of process it. The big thing that I'm talking about with that is the cinematography and how it meshes with the overall story. Because the story itself is told in an obituary, but at the same time, it's told from that person while he's alive, and at the same time, the people's stories that he's obviously got these stories from, in addition to the actual stories of those. If you're falling a little bit behind, it's because I fell behind too while watching the movie. And that's what I'm trying to say. It's like a story within a story within a story. It's like The Grand Budapest Hotel, it made it so that way you could follow it. But The French Dispatch overall, early on, I wasn't really able to because I was like kind of blown away at the fact that it was a story within a story within a story within a story. I was like, okay, when people say Inception was complicated, I was like, yeah, well, it really wasn't. I'm like, okay, this is probably how they felt because it took me a little bit to honestly, marinate and pick up on certain things. And that's not a bad thing because, again, I'm someone that does like it where I have to revisit movies in order to fully process it. But that's one thing I know right off the bat that I needed to pick up on, to rewatch it and revisit it and really kind of marinate on these things. And the reason why I'm saying this is because it then matches with the cinematography. The cinematography, again, it's to be expected. It's very symmetrical. It's perfect camera movement. But the big thing is that the color is what kind of throws me personally off, because there's usage of black and white and color cinematography and even aspect ratio changes. Like the main one is 4:3, but there are aspect ratio changes, and there is, again, the usage of color and then black and white. And the thing is, when you think about black and white as opposed to color, you think about black and white, you think that it's going to be utilized as kind of like this is a flashback scene. But the thing is, there are literally scenes where it will go from black and white to then color, literally in the same scene. So you're saying to yourself, what exactly does this mean? And that's why that aspect especially, I need to revisit it, because I know it meshes with the story about how, hey, this is something that is more than what it seems. Now, again, I know some people might just, throw this movie off into the woods and say, hey, that's just pretentious. But it's Wes Anderson. Wes Anderson isn't really pretentious in that he does have actual meaning to his films. When you watch his films, don't get me wrong, you're entertained, but there are a lot of things that he's trying to get across. In this film, I do think that there are certain things that I was able to personally take away from right off the bat. And the big thing is that when you have a story to tell, you have it where you have the actual story, but then you also have it where it's like you need to make it interesting, so you write it up a certain way in the actual paper. And in addition to that, you need to also have the guise of this is what you meant, and you need to play it off as though you actually meant that. And that's something that, again, I find to be interesting. And there's much more, again, to this movie, but I don't want to get into any spoilers. But the other thing is that this movie, again, it has perfect visual effects. You have it where, again, they utilize a lot of practical effects. There's a lot of interesting things that they decide to do. There's usage of animation in some scenes that I personally really liked. I know obviously Wes Anderson's worked with animation before, but towards the end they used animation. I thought it was very effective, but again, it's a movie that looks amazing. It looks great. There's a lot of humor too that personally worked for me, especially early on. It's an ensemble cast too, so every single performance is great. They're really, really good. There wasn't really any standouts per se for me personally, but I will say that everyone overall did a great job. And you see a lot of, other actors that have worked previously with Wes Anderson. So it almost feels like a reunion of sorts, but they obviously all played different characters than what they did in other Wes Anderson films. So that was great though. And again, it's a very meticulous costume design, production design, and makeup. I could definitely see this movie pick up Oscar nominations. And I haven't even talked about Alexander Desplat's score. That I could definitely see also picking up an Oscar nomination, because it's a great score. It's very consistent too, and it feels very personal, but at the same time epic in its scope, because again, it's played across all three stories, so it has to have consistency, but at the same time showcasing that these three stories are different. And they are. They're all told differently in some aspects, but similarly in others. So there's a consistency to this film, but also a flavor difference in all three stories. And I have to say, personally for me, the first story I found to be the most interesting with Benicio del Toro. I thought that one worked the best. And also, Léa Seydoux, I think I'm pronouncing that wrong, so I apologize, but she's great. I just recently saw Blue is the Warmest Color, and that was an incredible film. And this one, it's another great performance from her. I thought she did great. But again, I like this film. I think that this film, in terms of the filmmaking, is perfect. It's great filmmaking. There's some choices, again, like with the cinematography, that I do need to process a bit more, and I need to watch it again and again to really kind of break it down and really pick apart the symbolism as to why Anderson did that. I know I could probably watch an interview of him kind of explaining it, but I really do want to process it for myself and pick up on it. But overall, this movie, it did have some dull moments. Like in terms of negatives, I will say that there were some dull moments here and there. And again, some stories were a little bit less interesting than other ones. Like I would say personally, the third story, the one with Jeffrey Wright, I would have to say that one for me was the least interesting, in that it took a little bit to get going. Like at first I was like, I don't know how I feel about this, but by the end of that story, I was intrigued, and I did find that it was overall satisfying. But overall, this movie also, it sticks the landing with the ending. The ending I did find to be really good. And again, it's a Wes Anderson film. It's really well done. It's very entertaining in many aspects. It has really good humor. And it's a film that, again, I can definitely see myself rewatching it. But again, it's not a great Wes Anderson film. It's a good one, but at the same time, a good Wes Anderson film. It's still
honestly very refreshing. In today's world where we are conglomerated with a bunch of Star Wars movies, Marvel movies, it's amazing to see that Wes Anderson hasn't sold himself out and that he is someone that is able to consistently make good to great movies. And again, I'll take a good Wes Anderson film. You know, again, he's done great movies, but again, good Wes Anderson is still an A in my book. But for me, French Dispatch, I'll be giving it a 4 out of 5 star rating, which for those like a hot sauce rating, it's a good old Louisiana Pure Crystal hot sauce. So yeah, this was a good movie. Forgot to also mention I've actually ranked Wes Anderson's films on this channel. I've done a done a director ranking list of his. You guys can check that out on my playlist down below. Again, it's under director ranking list, but you guys can check that out. I want to know your guys' ranking of his films as of right now after watching The French Dispatch. Guys, you guys are the best. Thank you very much for watching with the subscription, notification bell, and I'll catch you guys later.